Oh, hi, hello. No, you're okay. Oh, we have been really challenged with these technical
I
things right now.
I think the delay on Facebook is quite amusing at the moment.
Yes, it is. Anyway, good morning. I'm Sandy Hounsell from Solvable Loving Relationships, and again, I'm here with my beautiful friend Samantha, and we're going to be talking today with some more questions. So over to you, Sam.
Okay, so some of the questions that we've got are around what the 5 hidden blocks are. So I think it's quite good if you can cover what those are for people.
Yeah, I found in all the work that I've been doing, especially through the soul healing, that I've been shown that there's really these deep hidden blocks that we have within ourselves. I call them imprints because they're stamped into our cellular memory, and they're also stamped into our DNA. And I found 5 key ones so far. There's 2 others related to the soul, but that's a whole different sort of conversation that we could have separately. There's the blocks that we take on as in our childhood, and also when we're in the womb, that we can take on fears and negative belief systems, and that's what we're talking about today. There's the genetic ones that are passed down from mum and dad and our grandparents, but there's also ancestral ones. So we could be going back maybe 7, 8, even 9 generations of belief patterns and fears that our ancestors have experienced that affect us. There's also the historical views of historically what men have been perceived to be, or what women have been perceived to be, or how society has viewed women and what their role is in life, and how they've been in some ways made to live a certain way against their wishes. So there's those historical views, and there's also our past lives, whether we believe in past lives or not. When I'm working on those aspects of a person and helping them with their belief patterns, if they believe in their patterning that there is a past life that they've experienced and they've taken on their views, it doesn't matter whether it's real or not. The fact is there's that belief. That they've had a past life, and then there's beliefs around what that past life has taught them. So we go and clear those up anyway. So I don't know which ones you want to cover today. I was thinking about all of them, but
I'm actually quite interested in the child and the womb hidden blocks, mainly because I am one of 4 girls, and I've had 2 girls, and I know through my pregnancy with the first and the second was very different, and they're very different characters already. And so I was just wondering how that is, how through nature and nurture maybe I can help, because I was a worrier with my first child, and she is a worrier. She worries about everything. And then I was a lot carefree with my second pregnancy, and she's a lot carefree. So like you saying that, was that me? Did I have an effect on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll go by what I've found, and the ladies that I've helped with that have had a lot of issues from childhood, and especially in the womb. And what I've seen is that once the baby has that awareness that whatever mum believes, and let's just go back to, sorry, I'm not going to go through the ancestral one. I'll just talk about the ones actually when they're actually in the womb. Let's give me an example of one lady I was helping, and her parents fought a lot. There was a lot of arguing, there's a lot of stress around money, and the mum didn't feel that she could financially support her child. And there was the stress actually between husband and wife over money and the ability to support a child. So what I saw with the baby was that it used to pull back inside the womb out of the fear when that argument was happening. So there's a lot of negative energy that being absorbed because the mum was getting very emotional. The baby was finding it very restrictive to move around and breathe. And so I actually saw the baby sort of move to a place in the womb higher up to sort of feel safe. So she, through that, she was born with feelings of not being supported. She had huge issues around money as she was growing up and in adulthood, which we had to work on. But she also had problems being born. Okay. And she was fearful of actually coming out of the womb because she was fearful of what the environment was going to be like. So that the emotional effect that the mum was feeling, she absorbed, because obviously baby's taking in food through the mother. But also the emotional upset, turmoil that mum used to lie awake at night worrying. The baby started to worry, so it was fretful. She was, and so she grew up with feeling quite unsupported. she did not like confrontation. So anything to do with confrontation, or if there was any sort of flare up of anger, or because she could see that anger coming up, she would retreat quite deeply within herself.
Okay.
So therefore she didn't stand up for herself very well. And consequently she was attracting men in her life that had anger issues. And
right. Okay.
and also had issues around money and supporting people. So they felt, the men that she was with felt that the woman should be independent and look after herself, and I don't really want to share my life with you. So she was attracting all of those things that she was fearful of. So then again, in the adverse, if you've got the mother and you've got a beautiful environment and babies feeling really safe, it can actually sort of, you can see the babies in the womb, they just sort of open up energetically and they can breathe and they can relax and they're looking forward to their birth, they're excited about being born. If you go to the opposite, where there's a lot of trauma in the environment, then the baby's not so excited.
Right. Okay.
You get born with those fears.
Fears. Okay, that's quite
so you
interesting
worrying,
to know. Yes, yeah.
Your baby's going to feel that nervousness in you, or that, because when we worry, and it's like if we're in shock or we're fearful, our muscles contract. We get
tracts, yeah.
And so the baby can feel that in the womb, that just the effect of the change in the energy.
Yes, yeah.
And
okay. Wow. So yeah, but that's really quite interesting. And then going forward, so if my eldest, who is more the worrier as well, taking on my worry, she should maybe talk to you, or
yeah, absolutely,
because I wouldn't want her to carry on worrying unnecessarily through something that was not really part of her life when she was when she's alive, because things have changed, but she's still carrying that on now. And
it, depending on, because if I was chatting with you and I was helping you with your issue, then we would be looking at, did you start worrying because of something got triggered when you were pregnant or in your relationship? Or is it that there's a genetic tendency down your family line where there's not necessarily mum was a worrier, but mum could have had anxiety, grandma could have had depression and anxiety, or they could have been coming out of a war zone, a war environment. There would be all that nervousness. So it'd be going back to actually look about where that worry in you started. So if I was working with your daughter, I'd be tracking back down your genetic line, and then I'd be going down through the ancestral line to see a little bit further back if what kind of life they lived. Were they always struggling to survive? Did they live in very unstable times? So we'd be tracking all of that back to see how those things were affecting you, your genetics, directly through mum's line, then down dad's line, and then ancestral down both lines.
So it's really important to look at all 5 blocks, because it's not just one area, is it? It's got exactly that. So it isn't just going to be the child and womb. It isn't just that's why.
No, that's why. You'd go back to look specifically at what was going on with baby in the womb and heal that and dissolve that impact. But if you want it to be gone for good, you track back to where that originally started. And it might not be in the form of worry.
Sure.
It might not be that grandma or granddad was a specific worrier. It could be that they lived in very unstable times. So they had anxiety, or they worried about, or were concerned about like their life and their money and where the food was coming from. So it could be a poverty thing. It could be a lack of food, or a lack of, maybe they didn't have good housing. So when I tracked my ancestors back, some died in workhouses in London, in the East End of London. So, I've been tracking some of those things back to clear that kind of issue, because my mum panicked a lot. So when I was tracking her one through, I could see where all her panic was coming from. So when I was in her womb, I didn't want to get born, so I came out a month late.
Wow.
Because I remember feeling all of her panic and worry, and not to do with having babies, because she loved having babies and she was in a beautiful relationship with my dad, but it was the natural panic in her that if anything little went wrong, she would immediately panic.
Okay.
It didn't have to be a big thing to panic about.
No, sure. Yeah.
Because of her, the way she was brought up, and what happened to her mother and her stepfather, and it was pretty cruel.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I was tracking those things back. Yeah.
Including, as you say, like the historic view of how women, you know, and men should behave and be and have all of that put on. It's really interesting, Sandy.
That one's particularly interesting this time.
Yeah.
Because if you just track back in what history books tell you, women were always viewed as choose what words to say here. They were always blamed for men if men got enticed and weren't loyal to their wives, because it's always the woman's fault. So she was the one that's always blamed for the sexual issues or the sexual attraction. Put her in a chastity belt when I go away because I can't trust her and I can't trust other men. There's always been this sort of sexual thing about women. Women got sold in a way through to create babies, to create peace between kings and queens. Women were always like a chattel, really, in that regard. So if you look at that, and then they weren't allowed to learn, they weren't allowed to go to school, they weren't supposed to be educated, they were too pretty, they had little brains that didn't think like men, and you know, we won't let you learn anything, you just sit over and do your sewing or your when you look at all of that, you can see why, you know, the suffragettes had a hard time pushing those boundaries away from women. But we've inherited all of that. It's a global consciousness that is in our ancestral DNA.
Yes, yeah.
And even if I've worked with people that haven't been around many times. I was working with one lady, it was beautiful. This is the first time her soul had inherited sort of a human form. But the fact that she was in human body still picked up all of that historical DNA. And so it's not so strong as the genetics and the sort of the ancestral stuff, but the historical views are still embedded in our thinking overall, and we're still influenced by that. You look at movies with Disney, it's like the knight in shining armor or the prince on the white horse will come and save you and you're going to live happily ever after. Women were always dependent on someone, or
Yes.
women can't work, can't look after themselves, and they've always been sort of pigeonholed in society. We're still affected by that.
Of course.
Especially in intimacy, in sexuality and money. That's where I see the historical view really have an impact when I'm working with someone as to why they have problems making money, or they have problems with intimacy, or So there's a whole mixture that you have to look at if you're really going to help a person totally transform. I mean, you could choose just to work on little bits, but if you want that complete sense of freedom and you want that complete sense of whole self, and for me it's all about being aligned with my soul and being my soul self in my human form, to really live my life to the fullest and the expression of myself, then I personally, I look to clean all that stuff up.
And I think that we've discussed before, and this is why you're discussing those 5 hidden blocks, is because sometimes, you know, wanting to work with you've got to know what you've got to work through, don't you? And even for me, like discussing the whole child and one of the hidden blocks, child and womb, and then the ancestors and history, you start to build a picture up of your own blocks as well. So I think it's very important, isn't it?
Yeah, and those things, you know, if you look at it from the psychology maps they do, and they show you the iceberg, 87% is we have got no clue. We're only 13% aware of our our thoughts and our belief patterns. We don't know what the rest of them are, and you know, how would we? Genetically, we might know that, like, I knew my mum was a panicker, but I didn't know that and I knew how that affected me as a child and how I had to work on that growing, you know, when I started work on myself. But I didn't know the extent of, when I was shown the roots of it and how deep it went into my cellular memory, and the emotional shocks that I got from it every time she panicked reinforced those roots, and how deeply it was embedded in me. But it didn't show up in me as panic, because I actually quite a calm, patient person. But it showed up in other ways in my life. I wasn't a panicker. If anything
No.
happens, I can calmly deal with it, sort it out. I might have a bit of an aftershock later on, like we all do, if you've seen an accident or something. But at the time, no, I'm really calm. But it affected me in other ways. It put me on edge around other things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a complete same transformation, or it doesn't manifest exactly the same way.
Sure. It will find
manifests
its
in
way
other ways.
elsewhere.
And that's what it's like roots of a tree. It just spread out into, and then depending on my views of life and the way I live life and my experiences, that underlying root system will map itself out in different ways. It will find an expression somewhere in some other form. You know, it might be I might worry. I can't think of what I worry about actually. But you know, I may have worried growing up about my own safety, or I always had this feeling, well, who's going to take care of me? Or I had that really strongly growing up, especially through my teens. It turned into a real sense of deep loneliness. It's not a direct manifestation. I mean, it's very interesting to map it all out and follow it. And you can actually see where it goes to and where it's come from. And that's why getting to the root cause is so important. Otherwise, if you go layer by layer, you could be at this 20 years and 10 years or whatever. But yeah, you'd be doing it bit by bit, and then you wouldn't necessarily catch the threads over there where those little roots have spread off to different parts of ourselves.
Okay. I do sincerely find it all very interesting, because I think even we've mentioned before, when you discuss that roots of yourself, you know, that the slight, I think you mentioned before, like you might get a slight backache or something as well. So it like you said, it manifests itself into a different sort of form as well sometimes, isn't it?
The back one's a good one, and that's a lot to do with our safety, and it's our security and our financial security. And so often people with, you know, really lower back problems, it can be that they just don't feel safe in the world, or they may have had a lot of trouble coming out of the womb. They might have had a forceps delivery and things like that. Or it could be that they grew up in a very poor household. So there's a lot of poverty belief patterns and insecurities that create instability in the hips and in the lower back. You know, so I mean, our organs are definitely affected by it, because that emotional imprint is our cellular memory as well. I mean, it's all the cells in our body. So some organs will be affected by it. Some organs will keep more emotions, different types of emotions, in another part of our body. So we look at all the organs as well to make sure the body's healthy.
Amazing. And then just generally, so to work through those 5 hidden blocks with you, we usually talk about how people can do that work with you is contacting you. Sorry. It's just if anyone
where you go with that question.
Sorry.
Just contact me on Facebook Messenger, on my Sandy at sandyhounsell.com, through my email system, or through my website, and book up a chat. And then we can explore how we can work together and how I can help you.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think that's.
So hopefully when we do this next week, we're not going to get all these technical issues.
No.
And if anybody's got any questions, you know, pop them in the comments. I'll come back and answer them later. But we're going to be doing this on a regular basis. So at the moment, we're taking in messages or sort of questions that come through the email system. But if you've got any messages that you want to send, or any questions you want answered, please pop them in the comments ahead of time, and or on the day, and we'll chat about whatever you want. Ask me anything you like, and
absolutely. If anyone's got another topic that they want to talk about, we can do
love,
that as well,
relationships, soul.
Perfect. Okay,
maybe next week we talk a little bit more about these and have some examples, or I know we were talking about putting a presentation together. For a webinar, so we can cover these in detail and actually give examples of how they show up and where they've come from, and the symptoms that they manifest. It'll be good to map it out a little bit more.
Lovely. I think that would be helpful.
Definitely. We'll get on and do that.
Lovely. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Okay.
Have a great day.
And you, Sandy. Thank you.